Alright, so we're gonna be going into a rapid game, and I'm just gonna showcase. I'm not even gonna go for a Scandinavian, I'll just showcase a classic e5 opening. And the only thing we're gonna be doing for the entire game is using fundamentals, basics, and key concepts and principles. So as you can see, we've already developed two pieces. We're controlling the center in the opening, right? And yeah, from here, we're just gonna continue along. We're going to develop the knight. We're just going to continue developing all our pieces, getting everything ready. And yep, this is the first part of just following all the opening principles. Now we actually have to be careful because white has an idea where they can take our pawn, and when our knight takes back, they can fork our knight and our bishop. So we need to add another defender to this pawn besides our knight. So we're going to push the pawn. Pretty simple stuff, but this is a common trap that you have to be aware of. And now instead of trading off the bishops, because our bishop is still pretty good and we don't want to give our opponent the trade on this square, we are going to move the bishop back, because if we take now, he'll be able to open up this file for his rook. And yeah, now he takes, and we're just going to continue developing our pieces. We're going to develop our bishop, and we're not going to fix our castling side yet. Now he goes for this move, which I guess is stopping us from playing knight here to attack the bishop. But that was never our idea anyways, because we're just going to develop. Now we do castle because we don't really have much else to do except develop our queen, which isn't really an ideal thing to do. And now, although knight here wasn't our initial idea, since he's already moved back, we can technically make him move twice. But instead, we're going to be just going with the basics. First, what we're going to do is we could either develop our queen, but before we develop our queen, I want to develop this pawn here, so that when we develop our queen here, they don't just pin our knight to our queen and hassle us for a while. Now that we've done this, we're going to develop the queen. Now all our pieces are developed except for this final rook that we need to bring into the game, because this rook in the future is already attacking, but the A rook is really passive, so we need to bring it into the center. Or we can actually start pushing on this side. So now that we've finished developing, we can consider taking space. The only problem right now is if we play this directly, he will take here and our position will be quite ruined. So I'm gonna shift the king to just wait out a move or so to make him have to make the decisions. Because in terms of tempo, we're actually on equal tempo. Now he goes for that move, which is an interesting move. We're actually going to move back as well, but our idea is to play f4 so we can open up this rook and then bring this rook to the center later. Right, so we're going to go f4 as we planned. He can take here, we can take back with the knight very comfortably, and then open up the bishop on this side as well. And overall it's just pretty good position for us. So yeah, we can take with a knight, or we can take here first. We'll just take with a knight. An idea he does have here is to push the pawn forward up one square, which would then kick out the knight and stop the bishop from being able to take, which would be a bit of a hassle, since then our bishop would be blocked off. But their bishop would also be equally blocked off, so that move is fine for us. He decides to trade off the bishops, which I don't really think is that great of a move, but it's fine by us since we can just take. And now his idea should be to take here, I suppose, and sort of force my knight to be pinned to the queen. But this doesn't work because my knight can move out of the way of the pawn attack to defend my queen. So for example, if he had gone here in this position, right, if he had two moves and he went here, then I would just go here to defend my queen, and his queen would take my queen, but it wouldn't be a loss because I would just trade off queens. That's it. So now I'm gonna go here and I'm targeting this pawn to basically skewer the queen and rook. That's an interesting idea, but I can sacrifice the pawn. I mean, sacrifice the knight for the pawn. And then he can sacrifice for the bishop, and then it's an interesting line. But I will go for it. So what we're doing now is we basically sacrifice the knight, but now we remove the defense of the knight, and now this knight only has one defense, but we have 2 attack on the knight, so we're going to be able to win the knight when he takes our knight with the queen. Another good thing about this idea is also that we can take with the queen to bring out into the center and resist up a pawn, and when you're up material in the endgame, it's always winning, most of the time at least. And yeah, we're just going to continue following basic fundamentals and ideas, which is continue to try and win material slowly. We're going to try and attack as well, so we're attacking the knight. And we have to remember, the only reason we were able to win that pawn and make such a move was precisely because we used the principles. Right, so now we're just going to take. And the thing is, if we hadn't used the opening principles and developed our knight quite a while ago, right, we wanted to develop the knight to a stronger square to control more of the center, right? And we also wanted to make our pieces active. If we hadn't done that, then we wouldn't have been able to play this move to get this sacrifice. And now he trades queens, and he may trade rooks as well, which is a bad move, but he doesn't, okay. And then we just move the bishop back here, and we have a very active bishop, just sniping the entire scope, the entire diagonal. And we're going to bring in our knight as well. That doesn't really do much as a move, but it is a bit difficult to defend this pawn. Because, for example, if we just go here, he's going to bring the bishop here to kick us out. So what we're going to do is, instead of defending the pawn, we're going to play here. So when he takes the pawn, we're going to get into the 7th rank. And rooks on the 7th are pigs, as we know. Okay, not 7th, but 2nd, because I'm playing as black. But rooks on the 2nd rank are pigs and will devour everything, and the king will not be able to come forward to stop me because my rook is also stopping the king, and the king can no longer move at all except here, which is useless. So we basically shut down the king, which is quite an important piece in the endgame. But not only that, we're also attacking this pawn and threatening to force the king into a windmill tactic. A windmill is basically when the king has only 2 moves, because if we take here with the rook, he'll only have 2 moves. Okay, that's interesting. But now we're gonna play this to try and get rid of the knight out of the position, so that we can play the classic windmill tactic. Because this knight that was on the edge, knights on the rim are very dim, and this knight was very inactive on the edge, so we're gonna get it into play and we're gonna attack. And that's an interesting idea, but it doesn't really work that well. In fact, we don't even have to care about his moves. We can just take the pawn, because if this knight ever moves off that square, we're immediately taking the pawn and forcing him into a windmill tactic, because this rook stops the entire file and escape of the king. So the king is stuck on these 3 squares, and we're just gonna bring the rook back and forth and back and forth and take everything. So now he moves the rook here, I think maybe realizing that he doesn't really have anything in the position. Now we have a few different ideas. What we could just trade off and be up a few pawns. Not really a few, but rather one. But or we can also consider sacrificing and then taking here, which would force him here but doesn't do much after that. That just guarantees a draw, which we don't want. So now we're gonna use the checks captures attack scheme. We're gonna look for checks. Do we have any checks? Yes, we can take here or we can take here. Are any of these checks to the king good? This check is horrible because it loses a piece instantly, but we do actually get the piece back. This check is okay because we trade off a piece and we do get the pawn, and both of these checks actually have the same outcome. But do we have any other moves? Do we have this? This doesn't work. Can we take any pawns? No. Do we have any attacks? We're not attacking anything right now. The only thing is this. So what should we do in this position? We have no checks, we have no we have checks, we have no captures. except this and this, and we have not really any attack until this knight moves. So let's just play simple. We can trade. These pawns are all okay. We can also think about trying to win this rook somehow, but we're just gonna take. And then we're gonna take with the bishop to try and still set up the windmill tactic. Or we could not, or we could choose to not do that as well. It's a bit of a free option here. For me, I'm actually gonna move here, because what this does is it threatens to move the rook here with check. And the king is stuck on the back rank, right? Because rooks on the 2nd and 7th rank are very powerful. They restrict the king from moving up. So instead of just winning this pawn directly, we're gonna threaten something first, because execution is strong, yes, but a threat is always better than execution. That is something that we also need to remember. We can even move back here to threaten the same thing again, by the way, which I will do to force him to push the pawn forward. And then we'll go back here and threaten this again, which will basically be unstoppable. Yep, now we're attacking the pawn, and we're threatening this, which he has to play this to stop. But if he plays that, he gets windmilled. Don't forget, our bishop still sees that square. So this is why we have such an active bishop. It controls just everything. And it even stops the rook from giving check as well, because the rook can't give a check. The bishop guards that square. This is why we need to have active pieces. Our rook and bishop are so active. The king is smothered. He can't do anything. And his own rook blocks his escape. And this rook isn't attacking anything, because both of these squares are defended. Both of the pawns are defended. This bishop is active. Yes, it does restrict my king as well. But he's playing with one piece against my king, where I have 3 pieces against his king and rook. Right, so he tries to trade, but this is not good at all, because the problem with this is that I check him, forcing him to go here. Then I'm gonna check him again, right, forcing him to go back, and then I'm just gonna go here. And who is stopping this checkmate? Because this is gonna be a checkmate threat, and the only way to stop it is to sacrifice the rook, because that move, well, yes, you give a check, you can't do anything, because this move, I just take your bishop. So now he has nothing. This check also does nothing because I just run the king. And these 2 rooks on the 2nd rank are so powerful that he just cannot stop them. And this is why we need to have active pieces, active rooks. And this is why rooks on the 2nd are considered to be some of the most powerful rooks, and basically most devastating, honestly. And we're just going to continue to move forward. He can give another check, but now we're here and there's no more checks. So now it's basically an unstoppable mate. In fact, yeah, now there's 2 mates, because the bishop again opens up. So there's this mate and there's this mate. So there's multiple checkmates, and he can't stop them both. So he's actually just completely lost and checkmated in this position. He can resign now if he wants, actually. But yeah, this is just an example of a game. If there's any questions or anything that you guys want to ask, you can just ask, right? You can, for those who know me, you can message me directly. For those who don't know me, you can just ask. But yeah, I might make this a YouTube video, so if that happens, then you can just ask in the comments. But you can see he's thinking of ways to save the game, but he can't, because it's just forced checkmate. It's forced checkmate. I have 3 pieces attacking his king. None of his pieces can check my king or do anything to defend. And it's just game over. It's just GG's. So yeah, we're gonna be very nice. I'm gonna say good game, well played, because I don't mean to be cocky, but it genuinely is just GG's. There's no way to stop mate. Even this doesn't work anymore because of this. And yep, so we win a pretty nice game. We will do the game review actually, just to show you guys. I'm not expecting to have too high of accuracy, but I just want to show basically what the good parts of the game and what the bad parts were, because you see I did have quite a few mistakes as well, right? So we're gonna go through the game, right? So this is just opening stuff. We're just starting off again. See, we're just developing pieces, continuing, and yeah, we have to defend. because if we don't defend this pawn, and let's say we just castle, it's immediately a bit worse, I think, because they can play this if I'm not wrong. And then fork. Oh no, they have takes the bishop. Oh, I'm actually wrong. Yeah, I'm wrong. Because now we're up a piece. You see? I was wrong. I forgot that the bishop was on this square. By the ways, yeah, it's a fine move, but I have to remember that for next time. Yeah, we could have taken the bishop to double the pawns, but the reason I don't like this is because, let's say this, and we just continue the game, right? And let's say both sides get castled, something like this. The rook does have like a semi-open foul over here on this line, and the bishop also sees the same thing. So let's say like if there is ever a significant amount of pressure on this pawn, I won't be able to defend it probably, and the rook is just much more active because it sees a lot more squares than my rook. My rook sees the pawn in front of it. This rook can potentially see all of these squares in front of it after the knight moves. But yeah, okay, let's go back to the review. So we castle, develop, all of these are okay moves. Not the best because yeah, they wanted me to kick the bishop with the knight for some reason. I don't know why it wants this. I'm assuming it's because you do get the bishop no matter what, so I'm assuming it just wants to take the bishop. But it says forced doubling of pawns, so I'm assuming, yeah, that's really weird because you attack the bishop and then suddenly you take the other bishop instead. But it is Stockfish, so it probably has its ideas, right? It is still fine. We're just playing normal. We're just playing good chess. We're trying to develop. This was apparently a mistake because it's better to win the pawn first. I'm not sure why they want to take first, because this, I understand, is an equal trade, but I mean, I don't really see much difference from the initial position, right? Because we eventually get to a similar position anyways. It's just that our knight is here instead and there's a pawn over here. That's the only difference. And that we didn't move the rook here later, but yeah. Yeah, so we take, this is fine. This was a mistake. Oh, because I thought that if they did this, I thought that this was still fine. Because I thought that the two pieces against the rook was okay for black in this position. I didn't actually realize, but apparently in this position it's not good. Because, in fact, it's... But yeah, taking the knight first instead of sacking the rook for the bishop, that was not a good move because that just gives up a pawn. We take, they wanted us to take with the bishop, which is, makes sense, but I wanted to just trade off to show how we should just trade and go to an endgame where we're better. But this is fine. They move the rook. This is actually a mistake apparently, because again, yeah, 7th rank, the rook gets to the 7th rank, which is the best move, and it becomes very active and it manages to restrict the king. But I thought that this was an interesting way of counterplay. Apparently they wanted the other rook instead, which I don't quite understand, but okay. But yeah, taking this pawn was a huge mistake instead of bringing the other rook to support, because now I also get into the 7th rank and I'm threatening the windmill. So you are threatening to win material through a tactic. And what this tactic is basically, let's just make a move for white and say that they maybe played like a move like this, right? Just moving the rook. Yeah, it's a blunder because boom, and the only move is here, and then I just take everything. And again, the only move is to go back, unless, yeah, you can actually take this. Probably, yeah, the best move here is that then, because you sack, but then you take this with check. They sacrifice for our bishop, but we take with check. But the idea of a windmill, basically, let me just show an example of that. Let's say that white had like, okay, let's just make a few moves for example's sake, right? Let's just say that there was something like this, right? We're just gonna make a few moves for example's sake. Right, let's say that this was the position. Now we would check, force the king over here, and we would check, force him back, check, force him back again, check, force him back, check, force him back again, check, force him back, check, and we would just take everything from him in the position using the windmill. because he's forced to repeat again and again and again. But it's not a draw by repetition because the rook is always on a different square, so it's always a different position. But yeah, after this move, this knight move is actually a mistake because Stockfish wants this, which what this does is, I'm assuming, sets up this move a lot better because now you're guaranteed to win a pawn and it's going to be with check. But I preferred having the bishop continue to snipe the long diagonal. But yeah, knight g5 is a mistake. Rook there was actually a blunder. I'm not sure why taking the pawn is a mistake though, because apparently they want this. But then let's say they want rook takes, but I want to just try what happens if pawn takes. Then we take. Oh, and they can't go here because that would be mate. Yeah, so that's why they have to sacrifice the rook. Interesting. But then after that they blundered with rook e7 again because they re-allowed the idea of taking with the bishop again. But we took with the knight instead. But then we threatened this idea, and he did stop it, but not for long. Apparently this is a bad move and we should have just gotten the pawn up, but I'm not sure why, so let's see. What was the best move here? The best move was to try and trade. Interesting. I thought this here, and I thought this. I thought this was good. Apparently there's check here and what? Check here. Oh, and then you pin the rook so that there's no consistent attack. Interesting. So we'll have to be wary of these ideas in the future. Rook f5, which, yeah, because this is a mistake because now you re-allow this idea, but there's no pawn guarding that square. Just now this pawn was guarding the square, but now it no longer guards the same square. So now I can bring the rook back to re-threaten the same idea. And now going rook here doesn't work anymore because, you see, that's the thing. I come in here with check. So I check you, force you to move, check you again, force you to move, and now I get in, and now there is no rook trade because I have two rooks on the same file already. And even that check, they don't do anything because I just run out. And no matter what you do, I just run out. And this is the final mistake because this allows the bishop to open up, and this guarantees that I get checkmate because it's force mate in 4. Once I move the king, there's no more checks, and we win the game. So yeah, that's overall view of how we did. We did pretty decently, and yep, any questions, just ask.